What's good, man? It's Dre up in here. Your favorite Mass fan checking in. What's happening?
What's good, Dre? What's good, Dre? So I had Dre on the episode because, of course, I made a lot of great friends. I made a lot of great friends on Twitter, but mainly the people that I found for the episodes of Groovy Files. First one was Jay Trent, who I met like in 2016 or 2017 off Twitter. And then I met Dre shortly after that because he was interacting with Jay Trent. So that's pretty much like, that's how some of my guests would be, like some of my friends, some of my people I talk hip hop with on Twitter and everything like that. So today's episode is going to be on Mos Def, rap legend from Brooklyn. Brooklyn is correct, right?
Yep.
Just double checking. So reason I want to do this Mos Def episode is because I feel like Mos Def is not necessarily underrated, but I feel like he's underappreciated. Because in the time period where Mos Def dropped his debut with Black on Both Sides, he pretty much I can't even count the amount of rappers that were just like super duper big at that point in time. Late 1999 or was it 2000?
It was 1999. So no, wait, no, yeah, 1999.
So like,
so it's like Jay-Z, DMX, Eminem just dropped his debut. Dr. Dre just dropped. So that's kind of the climate that Black on Both Sides came out in.
So you basically dealing with that. But at the same time, Mos Def was able to sell very well for the time being. Like he sold like 500,000 copies by February of that following year, which is a really great feat. I feel like, well, first of all, let's go around the table and talk about our favorite Mos Def songs. Starting with you, Dre.
Favorite Mos Def songs. So Black on Both Sides is one of my favorite albums of all time, and favorite songs on theirs, I probably got to go Brooklyn. Specifically the last part when he's rapping over "Who Shot You" by Biggie. I feel like that's some of the best rapping any human has ever done on any song. Like that shit is just perfect. Obviously Love, History, off of the Static with Talib Kweli on it, produced by I think Madlib did that beat or Dilla. I think Dilla did that beat. But Close Edge off of The New Danger. That's one of my favorite songs as well. New World Water. I like Umi Says a lot. I know, a lot of, real hip hop fans may not be crazy over it, but I love that song a lot.
Why do people hate that song? I love that song.
Because apparently at the time it was like very unexpected for Mos Def because, people hadn't really heard him sing and all that. Because you think about the Black Star album, he wasn't singing. Maybe like a hook here and there, but for like a whole song, he wasn't doing that. So I guess it kind of caught people off guard or whatever. But I love the song. And Got is probably another one of my favorite songs by him as well. So what about you?
Oh man, first of all, I'm gonna have to go with, I'm gonna read them off. Of course, Mathematics. Basically being political. Basically, I love when rappers can be like get their political points off and also be elite at the rapping part at the same time. Yeah. So that was an easy pick. And of course, DJ Premier, one of his most iconic beats ever. Second one, I think I'm gonna have to go with Rock and Roll. Rock and Roll was great because even though he ain't like rapping on there, he's much more melodic on there. I love it so much because it's a point that need to be said. And not to mention, he mentioned the people that instead of just saying, oh, this race took this genre from us, he stated the people who were actually responsible for the responsible for the pioneer, like being the pioneers of rock and roll and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's why it was so great. I want to say, I'm not sure if it's the intro, hip hop, or the beginning of Love. Also, definitely Love.
Yeah.
Great track on. That's a great track. I love that by him. No pun intended. Uh, no pun intended. I want to say hip hop because Mos Def was talking about like in the beginning. He was like, whatever's gonna happen to hip hop, that's what's gonna happen to us and this whole thing. Just the whole thing about Black and South. I just love Black on both sides in general. Another track. This is probably absolutely my favorite Most track ever. My favorite Most Def track ever. The Auditorium featuring Slick Rick.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Just a crazy Mad Lib beat. Just like it's just elite from like rapping, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely like my favorite Most Def track. I can't even front. But I love it so much.
I feel that.
But one thing in regards to the legacy of Mos Def, I feel like an underrated thing about him is that he has always been, to me, in terms of like just rapping, I have never once felt like, oh my God, Mos Def is why he ain't got the skill no more. But like, cause he's not a rapper that drops that much music. But every time I hear him on a verse, no matter what time period it was, he just blacked out. Like for instance, on Breathe on Navy Blue album, he went like that was arguably one of the best verses that year. So that of course just not being precise and being that good at that age, regardless of how much music he put out and everything like that, he still shows that he's elite. Being such a I don't like calling rappers conscious rappers at all because it puts them in a box. And when you put people in a box, that's how narratives start, and how narratives start, that's how a bunch of BS start. But in terms of just being socially aware and politically aware, but also kind of still a upbeat type of type of rapper, Mos Def was perfect at that. Like he's one of those people, like when speaking on social and political awareness, he was great at doing that, but also keeping an upbeat feel and be like, hey, we're gonna get through this, we're gonna do this. It's gonna take hard work to get where we want to go, but we're gonna do this, and I'm hopeful for Black people, and I'm hopeful for the world, and that's why I always like Mos Def. Not also to mention that's a great rapper name, like Mos Def, like Mos Def, like that's kind of like it's kind of like Young Thug before Young Thug, like that's a perfect like hey, why I ain't come up with that shit? So that's my whole thing about Mos Def. Not to mention, like to me, impeccable discography, like impeccable catalog. Not everybody can say they have a Black on both sides. Not everybody can say they have a bit of static.
Or Black
also making multiple classic records with multiple producers and multiple legends as well. And just basically just be able to get busy on any single track he was on. So that's just why, like, in terms of like just social and politically charged music, Mos Def, like you can't not mention Mos Def. Like it's just like when people talk about when we talk about like hip hop and talk about on social issues stuff like that, like you just cannot mention you cannot mention Mos Def. And I just feel like that's what his legacy is, being one of the best rappers ever, and also being one of the best rappers talking about political issues and what's going on in our world and everything like that. So that's his legacy to me.
Hmm. Yeah. I pretty much agree with all of that. I think one thing Mos Def was really good at was obviously rapping, but talking about these social and political issues without sounding preachy. Like some rappers who speak on issues, they kind of it feels like they talking at you or talking down to you. Most Def feel like he's talking with you, like he's like I'm one of the people and this is what we have to do, not necessarily what you have to do or whatever. So I think that's one thing that kind of separates him from a lot of other conscious rappers or whatever. But when I think about Most Def legacy, specifically with Black on Both Sides, with that being his kind of essential, classic album or whatever, solo album. Obviously, Black Star is a classic as well. But when I look at, so I like to look at albums and I like to look at, okay, what albums came after that that kind of embodies that same spirit? And there's three albums that I think about: College Dropout by Kanye, Food and Liquor by Lupe Fiasco, and Below the Heavens by Blue in Exile. I feel like those three albums kind of embody the spirit of Black on Both Sides and kind of that, sort of conscience, but sort of, free flowing and, introspective, lyrical type rap and things of that nature. It kind of feels like it's from the Most Def tree. And then obviously, before that, it's, you can go back to a Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul and things of that nature. But I feel like with Black on Both Sides, in regards to three albums, you kind of get the singing aspect as well, because a lot of conscious rappers wasn't really singing or showing their versatility. Not until Lauryn Hill and Most Def, and then Andre 3000 kind of later in his career. But I feel like Black on Both Sides kind of provided the blueprint for songs like "Hurt Me So" by Lupe, where Lupe's kind of singing the hook a little bit. Um, "Sunshine" by Lupe is kind of the Miss Fat Booty
Blue
tree.
blue collar worker.
Blue collar work, exactly. Blue collar worker, dancing in the rain. Where he's kind of singing the hook or whatever and telling the story. So I feel like when you're thinking about Mos Def's legacy, those albums kind of come to come to my mind when I think about, okay, what is Mos Def's legacy and where is his influence really shining? And in the instance of, like you mentioned, he's still relevant. The new generation still calls him features. He's working with ASAP Rocky. He's worked with Freddie Gibbs. He's worked with Navy Blue, and like you said, he delivers every time. Like, can you name a whack Most Def verse? I know I can't. So it's like he's gonna deliver every time. And but yeah, when I think about his legacy, I try to think about, okay, what came after that that embodies kind of that same spirit. And I feel like, his influence is pretty evident, when you see the albums that came after that.
So like with most deaf, to me, I feel like I'm gonna be honest. I feel like if you talking about any type of part of me thinks if you're talking about any type of political topic or a social topic
Hmm.
and you doing harmonizing with it, or you just talking about it in general, I feel like it kind of creeps into it's gonna creep in there regardless if you stated most Def as your influence or not.
Yeah.
Like you kind of he one of them people that kind of like you can I wouldn't say his influence overrides people's music so much. Like you can listen to an album like, man, yeah, this definitely a most Def like influence album. But at the same time, it's kind of like, hey, he not there's a little bit on most Def in a lot of pretty much a lot of politically and socially charged albums like after Black on Both Sides. Let's really let's be for real. Like you know how when people say when we talk about influence in the rap game,
Yeah.
people are always gonna say the same three or four answers. Like gonna be like, oh yeah, Wayne influenced he influenced everybody.
Yeah.
blah blah blah, influence everybody. But my issue with the influence topic is that people can never really state, like the people will never really state how they influence them.
Yeah.
And it feels like a low, and they're always saying the same names. Like, for instance, when people say, um, like Andre 3000 influential, or that's not the slander. I'm not slandering Andre because he's absolutely in my top 5 era. Like, he's arguably my favorite rapper ever.
Yeah.
Some people just never state how this person was influential. That's just my whole thing. Like, if you don't say the name, at least be able to state, at least be able to tell me why.
Exactly.
That's why I don't really hold influence too high on my list in terms of, like, when I say if somebody's a GOAT, because you can still be influential, and I consider you the GOAT. I feel like it's a mix of stuff you have to have to be in the GOAT conversation. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I think influence is definitely important, but when I think about influence, I think about, okay, well, what good has come from your influence? You know, like the albums that I mentioned, you know, Below the Heavens, Food and Liquor, College Dropout. Those are undeniably classic albums. Like, nobody's gonna debate the classic status of those albums, at least at this point. So when I think of Mos Def's influence, like, okay, well, this nigga has a classic influence tree, you know? And so when you think about somebody like, and I don't want to, because Wayne's one of my favorite rappers of all time, but when people bring up, you know, Wayne's influence, I'm like, okay, well, how much good has come from his influence? Like, yeah, it's a lot of niggas, you know, sipping lean, got dreads, tats on their face, and cool, that's all that. That's Wayne's influence. I get it. But what good music has come from that influence? You know, like Young Thug is great. I give y'all Young Thug. Young Thug is great, but like, what else?
Yeah.
What else?
Wayne's. I'm not going to even try to get off this tangent,
Yeah, I
but
got you.
to me, like, but we got time anyway. So I want to say, actually, I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just going to say influence the journey. This is why I hate when people do this and somebody says, well, if this rapper didn't exist, then this rapper wouldn't have made this album, or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Okay, niggas, like, what? Like, my whole thing is like, okay, we get they were influenced, and you can't take that away from me and like act like they would be the same rapper without that person influence.
Right.
But at the same time, though, there's a thing where there's influence stronger than other influence in a rapper, and that exists. So that's why I always be mad when people be like, "Oh, Eminem influenced Kendrick or Tyler influenced Kendrick." How much does the good part of, like, when you're talking about them at peak, how much does the good part of Eminem showing these rappers? Like, be for real. Like, when I think of Tyler at peak, I really don't think about Eminem at all. Like, I feel much more of
Pharrell.
I feel much more Pharrell.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like a lot of East Coast influence in a sense.
As far as
I
the
feel
way he raps, yeah, I can see that.
because this was like, I had said this before, and some people have looked at me crazy, but I feel like people don't. I feel like some people overlook on how OF was kind of like was pretty like, I'm not gonna say fully influenced by East Coast rap, but you could hear it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like,
Definitely.
I even said at one point, this gonna sound crazy. I even said at one point that I feel like Earl is kind of influenced by Cam. I said that at one point. Cause you can hear it, like you can hear Emmett, like you can obviously hear Emmett doing that Earl cadence, like early Earl, but at the same time though, I feel like you can hear Cam a little bit too.
I ain't mad at that. I'm definitely not mad at it, especially with
But
the way he was rapping and the way he was rhyming and all that. I can see that. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
like just influence in general, people act like you have to have like such a very big notable thing when
Mm-hmm.
you're doing like in influence to be influential, and that's just not true. Like
Yeah.
for instance, like I want to say, let's say Currency, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
is we talk about how you can clearly tell in terms of influence, he is in like Wayne and Big Boy are very kind of like the Big Boy part goes underrated a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
considering influence isn't just who somebody states that they're influenced by. It's you're gonna have to listen to you're gonna actually have to listen to the music to
Yeah.
figure out what this person influenced by. Because like there's references that they from older rappers they do all the time. The rhyme scheme, the delivery, all that type of stuff. It's just a mixed bag of stuff. I just hate when people are like, "Oh, this one notable thing means they're influential."
Yeah.
Like it's much more than that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, so that's just my whole thing on that topic.
I feel
Um,
like I feel like to piggyback that point, I feel like there's a difference between inspiration and influence. Like Eminem and Wayne probably inspired Kendrick to rap. And obviously some of his early music, obviously, trying to sound like Wayne or whatever. But when you listen to Pimp a Butterfly or something like that, do you hear Eminem? Do you hear Wayne?
nigga, hell no.
Not really. So it's like, yeah, I feel like people kind of confuse the two, like inspiring somebody to do something versus influence them, where it's like, yo, I'm trying to sound like this person, or this project sounds like this person. So when I listen to Below the Heavens, I'm like, okay, this is Black on Both Sides. Like I can hear the obvious influence in the production, in the rhyming, in the subject matter, in everything. I can clearly hear that. Like when I listen to the Butterfly, I hear Outkast, I hear Andre 3000, I hear it in the production, I hear it in Kendrick's flows or whatever. And when I hear Food and Liquor, I hear Mos Def, I hear Nas too. I hear It Was Written in Illmatic and how he's rapping and all that. So I feel like influence and inspiration are kind of two different things. I know they probably have like the same definition, but I feel like influence is more so how you sound versus inspiration means I want to do this because of that person. So I feel like there's a difference between the two.
Also, one thing I want to say is, first of all, I'm gonna go ahead. You need to just go ahead and trademark the term "classic influence tree" because that's a term
Yeah.
that I like. Seriously, like you need to go ahead and trademark that shit because I've been trying to find. I think like a lot of people been trying to find a word for that shit,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. Like that's honestly how I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start using that in my criteria for Go Talks,
Go
classic
ahead.
influence. But the second thing, what I'm gonna say is not only talking about the difference between inspiration and this is more on the artist side.
Yeah.
The artist in question that is inspired or influenced. There's a certain point in time to where you may be influenced by them and
Hmm.
inspired by them, but at a certain point in time, there's like, hey, you slick just copying now. You
Yeah.
can't you just can't make original music now. Like we see rappers early in their career, like they rap a lot like they're the person that made them want to rap up, like and that influenced them a lot.
Yeah.
But the great rappers, they grow out of that.
They find their own
There's
way.
some fellas that kind of like, hey, I'm gonna just stay in this pocket. Like even though I'm good at rapping, I can never really go this to that next level because I can't get out that stage of hey guys, I just can't make any original music like that. That's just how it is. That's just we all know who I'm talking about with this. So let's just start. Like I'm not gonna say that name.
I got you.
Logic. But um, but yeah, this is my whole thing on the influence whole tree. The final topic, how good do we think the Black Star Mad Lib album will be?
um,
I'm be honest. I feel like it's definitely gonna be an album we consider. The
yeah. I
question
mean,
is, I don't want a certain person on there, so that's why I'm not going. That's yeah.
I feel you. Yeah. I feel like most Def over a CD of Mad Lib beats. I feel like you just can't go wrong with that. Like whether he's singing, rapping, harmonizing, beatboxing, I don't care. I need to hear it. So I feel like it's at worst, it's going to be good. At best, it's probably classic level or whatever. But at worst, I'm expecting something good. So I'm willing to hear it. Obviously, for the same reasons I don't want another person on it. But I'm definitely interested to hear Mos Def over Mad Lil Beats and whatever features they pick.
100%, man. But other than that, that wraps up Groovy Files episode 2. I appreciate Dre for having
No
Dre for
problem.
coming on for the second episode. Third episode, I'll probably let the people vote, or I'll just decide and not let y'all vote at all. But I'll definitely want to do somebody. I think next episode will be somebody from the West Coast or the Midwest. So be on look out for that.